Hey everyone, welcome back to Bagel TCG. It's been a while, but I am back for a Fang deck tech for the Super Slam meta. There is some changes, not just with a few, just a few cards from the new set, but also for the overall meta, some card changes need to happen, and some philosophy shift for the deck. So we're gonna get into it, but before we do, I want to just talk about my experience with Fang. So Fang has been kind of the main hero I've been playing for maybe almost a year now. Maybe not quite that long, but he's been my main hero. I was a Guardian player before that. I still like playing fairly defensive decks. I like playing good value, good number decks. I had played a bit of Guardian, a bit of KO Armed and Dangerous, so also pretty good numbers deck, and ended up really liking Fang. He was especially good in the last meta before the bans, so he had a really amazing matchup into both Gravy and Slippy. But he has a little bit of trouble into the arcane decks in particular. You don't have that many pitch cards, and you just really can't stop arcane in most ways. So any kind of arcane deck was a bit of an issue, but luckily Gravy was keeping most of those down, along with Slippy also having a decent matchup into them. So I think Fang was probably a top five deck in the last meta. I think he's generally slept on because he's not very played. People don't really like playing him that much. He hasn't been explored as much as a lot of other decks. So I think his correct deck setup is not even clear. A lot of people like all blues. You can see I'm just playing 15 blues. Some people did full red line. I think Mara Ferris did a very heavy red line deck. And some people like all yellows like that version or a mix of blue and yellow. It's not really clear, and I think because there's no quote unquote best version of the deck, it also isn't showing up as well as it should. And it does have some fundamentally bad matchups that you just don't want to see. But I think it's been slowly getting better. It's been getting more refined, and people are getting better at playing it. So I think if you want kind of an underdog pick that has some actually quite good matchups in the meta, Fang is a good one for you, and I hope I have the experience enough to talk about it. I have, I don't know, maybe a few hundred games on Fang now across Talishar and quite a lot in paper over the last year. Quite a few callings, pro quests, and a lot of armories. So hopefully I have the experience to talk about Fang. He's definitely been my main for a while and will probably still be my main for a while. I like to try something new out every set. So I try all the new heroes out, but none of them usually have grabbed my focus as much as Fang so far. Um, I'm gonna keep this, I guess, like middle level of experience, meaning I'm gonna assume you know what a lot of Flesh and Blood cards do already. I'm not gonna read like every card out to you. You can read them all in the link for the deck list below. I'm not trying to do like full beginner level, but I'm also not gonna assume like you're a Fang pro. So just kind of average Flesh and Blood player experience. Just gonna talk about that. So the core of the equipment for Fang can never really change for three of the slots. You basically always have to play Valiant Dynamos, Grains of Blood Spill, and I guess Braveforge Bracers. I mean, maybe a better gloves will come around one day, but I kind of doubt it. For now and for the foreseeable future, Braveforge will be the best arm piece, but I don't really ever see Valiant Dynamos or Grains of Blood Spill not being the best in slot. Equipment pieces for Fang in those slots. Um, they're just really good at what they do. The main thing that switches most matchups is the headpiece. We have a lot of solid headpieces that we can swap out, and that's basically the only headpiece that swaps. I think in my sideboard, yeah, there's just three headpieces, and then the Spellfray leggings are just for like basically just Kano. I think this is kind of a slot you can mess around with, because Kano obviously never does our physical damage, so Valiant Dynamos doesn't really do anything there, but every other deck in the format does physical damage, so Valiant Dynamos are good. And then we have a bunch of head pieces we can swap into, depending on the matchup. But that's really the main equipment piece that swaps is the headpiece. The default one here is Crown of Providence. The deck can definitely clunk sometimes. You really need to find a blue early as soon as possible. Like every hand for the first 3 to 4 hands is usually how long it takes to get online. So yeah, you need a blue every hand, and with 15, statistically you should have them 1 out of 4 cards, but obviously you don't draw as perfect as statistics are. So Crown of Providence lets you get around that a little bit by filtering a card, which is nice. It's not always necessary. That's why there's some better headpieces in other matchups. You could even cut this. I've seen some people cut it and just run Balance of Justice, but I think it's worth the slot because there's a lot of matchups where Balance of Justice and Kabuto don't do anything, and you'd rather have the filtering here. Maybe there's a deck with a lot of Arsenal Disruption. For the decks, so there's one card that you'll probably see that's missing that's quite common is Pledge Fealty. Maybe it's in the maybe board. I have a huge maybe board. This card, right? This card's played in a lot of Fang decks. I'd say the majority. It does, something really good for our gameplay, and it just makes you a fealty token unconditionally. That's kind of where the power of it ends, which I'm not saying this is bad. That's a really good effect for Fang, who has to get to 3 fealty as soon as possible. But it doesn't block. It only pitches for 1. It doesn't really buff anything except giving a weapon +1 and go again. It's basically bad in every single aspect except for the text box. Um, and for me, that's just not quite good enough. I need my cards to like at least block for 2, or pitch for 3, or do something else other than just resolve and then that's it. Were so many times where you would draw it once you're already at like 5 fealty, and it's almost as blank as a card can be. Like it feels like you effectively got an IP penalty. And you don't really ever want to have cards in your deck that are effective IP penalties. Like your cards should at least block for 3 or pitch for 3. Um, so that's why Pledge Fealty is not in the deck. In place of it, we have Endear Devotion, a not much harder, somewhat harder to turn online card. Endear Devotion, you have to have it on the second Draconic Chain Link to make the fealty. But I mean, we have enough ways to do that. You can arsenal this and wait to get there. And most importantly, it blocks 2, right? So obviously, it's not as good as blocking 3, but if you're at 5 fealty already and you can't resolve this, or you just need to block. Oh, actually, it blocks 2. How amazing is that? You can block with a card and get 2 value from it instead of doing essentially nothing with it. So it does have a good thing going for it there. Of course, it's a bit harder to activate. It doesn't just make the fealty unconditionally. But we're playing 15 blues, and we're playing enough ways to start the chain where hopefully you can get it off a bit. And you'll see we're playing other ways to mark and get fealties as well, obviously. So, of course, it's maybe a little slower getting online without the pledge fealties, but I've just found that the deck feels way better without. Yeah, I just lost so many games drawing pledge fealty late. Or like even worse is like Syndra. You're playing in Syndra and you have double pledge fealty, and you're already at 4 fealty or something, and so it's just like okay, so I just take 6 damage where I should have taken, even if you have 2 of these, you can block 4 at least. So it can be hugely bad later in the game. The rest of the cards are, I guess, fairly standard. We have a Firm Loyalty, Blistering Blade for the Jakai, Fire and Brimstone. Just a reminder, this is like the best card in your deck. Sometimes you have to block with it, and that is what it is. But the majority of the time, you need to arsenal it and get to 3 fealty, and then just do a big like 25 to 30 damage turn. Usually, what you should get out of this. If you have 5 swings with it, 4 swings with it. Sometimes you get a 5th one, especially if you can get a Long Whisker Loyalty with it. It's like 5 swings, all buffed up. Should be able to get around that much damage. The last game I just played on Talishar while I was messing around before I drew it with also a Savor Bloodshed and a Long Whisker Loyalty. I think my other 2 cards were a Scar Tissue and a Blistering Blade. So you can do the math there. It was a lot of damage. So yeah, that's pretty important. We've got Scar Tissue, Searing Gaze. All of these are pretty standard, so I'm not going to go over too much of that. For the D-React suite, that can swap around quite a bit. Sink Below is the only one that's never going to change. This is just really good. It's another version of kind of Providence filtering, which is pretty significant for the deck. The other D-Reacts have changed a lot over time. I think Smokeout has slowly solidified its place as the second best D-React. Just the unconditional mark is really good a lot of the time. Turns out most decks attack with red cards, obviously. So I think this card's a little too good not to play 3 of at the moment. I slowly had to convince myself on it, but it's just really strong. And then these Fate for Fiends were shelters for a really long time. But Slippy and Arachnes and Assassins in general are not seeing a ton of play at the moment. So Shelter is essentially just for like Syndra and then really weird Verdant's turns. So I found the Opt is just generally better. Like I've said quite a few times now, the deck can clunk, and so opting is just really good. If you're already at 3 fealty, being able to opt the blues to the bottom that you don't need is nice. if you're not at 3 fealty, being able to keep blues on top or keeping fealty generators on top is quite nice. So it's not quite as good filtering as Sync Below, but it's the next best option. And we want roughly 8 to 9 D reacts in the deck. You can trim one Fate Foreseen if you want, but that's kind of the sweet spot for Fang I found. You always need these 6, like the Smoke Out and the Sync Below, and then you probably should play 2 to 3 other D reacts. I'm in the deck. That's just a lot of people play like you can even play some yellows like that all you got or yellow Sync Below. But I've just found the 4 block is so good. I go for Fate Foreseen here. The only other weird red in the whole deck is Hunt the Hunter. Still the most experimental one for me. Few big things going for it. It's a 3 block. That's really nice. This deck blocks quite well, especially with the insane armor suite, but most of our reacts only block for 2, so we do have to have basically everything that's not a react block for 3, essentially, right? Like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 blocks here, so we have 15, and then we also have 3 Tooth the Dragon, so that don't block at all. So we have like 18 cards that don't block very well. So the rest of the deck needs to block 3. I think there's only one other card it's a tip off, so we have 19 cards that don't block. So I want the other, 41 to be 3 blocks at least, or 4 blocks if I can help it. So Hunt the Hunter is a 3 block. That's kind of the base I need for extra cards. And then it has a fairly relevant effect. When this attacks a hero, if you've played another red card this turn, mark them. So mostly this is when you can keep a lot of extra cards in hand, and you already have 2 reacts and a blue. So it kind of needs a specific hand. It needs like early game at least, assuming you're not online, it needs 2 0-cost reacts and a blue. Could have a 1-cost react, I suppose, if you have a vigor up. And then it ends up being a pretty amazing chain ender. Hopefully you've hit with one of your other cards, and now this will mark and also threaten to make the fealty itself, so that's really nice. And then if you can't keep all that cards because you need a block, this is basically always the first card you block with, which is fine, right? Like it's a 3 block. Fang's pretty happy to block with 1 card early and then like up to 3 cards late. So I think that's pretty nice. It kind of is like an E-Strike for the deck actually, where E-Strike you mostly block 3 with it, but then you sometimes, if your opponent lets you keep bigger hands, you can extend with it. So this is kind of an extender, but it's actually at the end of the chain because we already get so much go again early. That we don't need early extenders, we need late extenders. Now the blue suite. So there's like 12 blue cards that will never change for this deck. Well, I guess actually 9. Glint the Quicksilver, the best blue in the deck. Maybe it's the second best blue now, actually, after Overcrowded, but it has been the best blue in the deck. Giving a weapon go again is not insane, but it's nice if you need to get to second chain link. But the main thing is the draw card. Later in the game, your opponent's more likely to be blocking because they'll most likely be at lower life total later in the game. And you also don't want your blues late in the game because you are at 3 fealty. So this kind of fills both roles, right? Early game, it's a blue. Late game, your opponent's blocking probably, and you can get a free draw card and go again. Kind of does everything you want. Overcrowded is the only main deck new card, and it's pretty busted. It's just frankly really insane for this deck. You will almost always have a fealty and a vigor. You should be floating a vigor almost the entire game, not just because of Overcrowded, but because we play some 1-cost cards like Endear Devotion and Hunt the Hunter. But I just like floating a vigor the whole game if I can. It's like, okay, you go down 1 resource, but now you have a blue 4 block in your deck. Because with fealty and vigor out, this blocks for 4. I mean, that's worth it to me. Just float a vigor, keep your fealties, and you have these blue 4 blocks that also have ambush, so they can block from Arsenal. So now you have a blue 4 block that can block from Arsenal. You're never attacking with it realistically, but it's a pretty amazing card. I mean, the worst case scenario, it's a 3 block ambush when you have a fealty out, which is still quite strong. I mean, if I could put ambush on any of my 3 block blues, I'd be pretty happy for it. So also helps versus Codex, which is one of the more challenging cards for this deck to deal with since it gives frailties, and that is a pretty huge problem for the deck. Although luckily, frailties or Codex is not seen that much anymore. It's still seen sometimes. So great card, definitely the best blues. We have Relentless Pursuit, 3 block, pretty minimum for a blue, and a mark. Mostly just resolve this turn 0. Otherwise, it doesn't get resolved that often. It mostly gets pitched and blocked with, because you don't want to just play a full card to mark most of the time. But if they let you keep an extra big hand early for some reason, then you can play it and help you get to 3 fealty. The next blue is Warmonger's Diplomacy. Um, this card doesn't really hurt us at all. I think our only non-attack in the deck is Savor Bloodshed, right? Yeah, I think it only hits our Savor Bloodshed, which is, yeah, you can just not play it or block with it the turn you would have. And it's pretty good into a lot of decks right now. The nice thing is that a lot of times our second dagger will have go again if we have double reacts. So you can play anything like this at the end pretty easily. Some matchups it doesn't do anything, and then it's just a blue 3 block, which once again is fine. Some matchups like Gravy, it's pretty good because they can't play an ally and attack with it on the same turn. You'll learn what matchups Warmongers is good for or not. It's not even good in a lot of matchups now, but it's good often enough that I think it's worth it, and it'll probably always be worth it in the deck just to have gotchas in certain matchups like, Gravy or Florian when they can't activate gloves and swing. It mostly gets blocked in pitch, like I said, but it's nice to have basically all the blues are there to block with in pitch, and then have some functionality if you get extra big hands, which doesn't happen that often. So you don't have to worry about it that much. The last 3 blue slots are pretty wonky, and I'm not confident on these. Probably the 3 cards I'm least confident on in the whole 60. I'm playing 1 Incision and 1 Nip at the heels, 1 Nip at the heels. These are basically functionally identical cards. I'm just playing 1 of each, so my opponent doesn't know how many copies of each I have. You could play 2 Incision or 2 Nip at the heels. Doesn't really matter. I'm just having fun with 1 of each. Um, this is just so you have a few extra reacts in the deck, and if you get unlucky enough where you don't draw any ways to use your fealties or keep them alive, I mean, and you have extras, you can pop a fealty and have a somewhat functioning turn with 1 of these. Tip off, I was actually at 3 of this at some point. It's kind of a pledge fealty in a lot of ways, in the sense that since you can play it after they declared blocks, there's a lot of times where if they have no reaction, you're just gonna discard it and then immediately get to hit them and get the fealty, which is almost the same as pledge fealty. Like I think I like blue tip off almost always more than pledge fealty, but still it's only a 2 block, and as I had said before, I really don't want any of these cards to be 2 blocks. So I mean I could cut this completely, but I kind of like the one of gotcha. It's kind of similar to these. It's just like, oh, you get one of them off, and maybe your opponent has to think about it the rest of the game, but you just have 1. So it gets pitched most of the time, blocked with a lot of the time, and then occasionally you can use its effect. Once again, another kind of Relentless Pursuit turn 0. It's quite nice as well. So that's the 60, the fundamental parts of the deck. Now the sideboard has changed most drastically. I think outside of like the 3 headpieces, every card in this sideboard is different than it was like a few months ago, just because the meta has shifted so much. So this main deck is set up for the like aggro and traditional matchups, so into Syndra you don't need to change anything. I think this is actually the perfect setup already for Syndra. I have some matchups. I have all the matchups here. Oh, you can't even see when I click on it, but if you click default matchup, you can see all of them. I don't think all of them are updated. I mostly just updated the popular ones like Gravy Bones and Syndra and Florian and stuff like that. So don't expect them all to be up to date, but you can get a general idea. But this is default for like aggro. So you would play this exact thing into Syndra. You would play the exact same thing into KO as well. You would just switch in Balance of Justice. So it's kind of the default deck. The sideboard is mostly for slower decks, um, slower decks and arcane decks. So you can see these 2 arcane polarities are just for arcane decks. Verdance and Florian are both super popular right now. And so I just want a 4 value card. As I said, we pitch pretty horribly for arcane. I mean, we only have AB1, and even then we don't have a blue in a lot of our hands, so we don't want to pitch anyways. So it's better just to use a card, and this is even better than AB3 because it gains you 4 life back. So it's kind of a nice. You play it into all the arcane decks, and you're pretty happy with it. It could be Sigil of Solace if you want more like consistency, right? Because then it'll always gain 3, and this you have to take Arcane. But I've found this is not hard to turn on at all. Like the Arcane decks are going to deal you Arcane within a turn or two. If they don't deal you Arcane that turn, you just Arsenal it within a turn or two later. they'll do it. So yeah, 4 value, life gain, not bad. Has a little bit of anti synergy with this parched terrain, but this card is pretty fundamental for the Verdance matchup. I think that matchup was like I'd say a little unfavored before. It wasn't like horrible by any means, but it can be a little scary, especially depending on how early they draw their scours. It can be a little scary. Um, but parched terrain is pretty amazing in that matchup. You just play it out, and their hero ability is off for almost the whole game. Um, if you draw them, and then the first one can usually last 4 to 5 turns on its own, no matter what. The second one, if you draw it pretty soon after, you can cover almost 10 turns straight with parched terrain, and the game's probably not even going to go that long. It is also an instant. It costs 1 is the only downside of this card, but it's an instant, so it can even activate our weapon. So if you want to like pitch a blue and play it out, it can turn your weapon into 2-go again, which is kind of funny. Um, so yeah, this is I don't even know what matchups you'd run it in other than Verdance, but it just turns the Verdance matchup from like maybe 35 to 40% win rate for us into like 60% win rate at least. So I think you have to play like at least 1 copy, but I think 2 is good to find it consistently. Um, yeah, it's a really good card. Into Verdance will probably happen in our sideboard as long as there is any life gain deck. It does have some anti synergy with Arcane Polarity, like I said. So if you draw Arcane Polarity, just let Parched Terrain die, I suppose. It's not that big of a deal. You can just play like Arsenal Arcane Polarity or play it next turn. But we're only playing this into the Verdance matchup. The other Arcane decks, these are always good and always live. Amulet of Echoes, I think this is only for Acilio, but that matchup's pretty horrible. It's still pretty bad. I don't think there's much we can do to fix it. He just does such big stuff, and we don't play any Disruption or AB. So it's a pretty bad matchup, but Amulet of Echoes gives us some equity if we draw it. Plus the Arcane Polarities are kind of nice. That's it. That's all you gotta play those Arcane Polarities, the Amulet of Echoes, and pray into Acilio. Otherwise, it's kind of rough. Twist and Turn, this is an extender, just does a lot of damage. It's kind of a 0 for 5 because it gives +4, and then that's a swing with an extra dagger. And we're probably playing it on bigger hands, so it's pretty nice, especially good into Gravy because you can swing the buffed thing into like a Whaler or a Chum, and then you get an extra dagger swing after. So pretty great card. Yeah, I have nothing. These used to be cut from the same class. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, they used to be these cut from the same class, but which is much better into other reaction-based decks. So if there's like a bunch of warriors and a bunch of assassins in the meta, so this was during Slippy, this card's like much better. But there's not really a lot of other reaction decks right now. So Twist and Turn, it's a 3 block, which is already a nice advantage, and yeah, it's better into those slower decks. And then the last card here, the headpieces are kind of self-explanatory, I think. This is just for like basically other warriors. This is for if they draw 2 cards, so like KO and Gravy. This is if they deal arcane damage. This is just for Kano, I think. Um, this is actually, I don't think you should play this into Acilio. I think you should play AB0 into Acilio because they draw 2 cards often enough that you want Balance of Justice. But this is for Kano, Verdance, Florian, Vincent. Maybe that's it. Last card here for the Realm. So this is a pretty recent addition as well, like most of the sideboard. It's a pretty interesting card. This is our Popper for Prism, which is worse because we were playing 7 power Poppers before. I think I was playing Battlefront Bastion. Also tried out Rally the Rearguard, so these 7s, which are nice, and obviously much better into Herald of Triumph. But you don't play them in other matchups is the issue. Like you just don't ever play them into anything else. And this lets us have a Popper that also is quite good into other matchups. In particular, Florian and Verdance both have ways to destroy our fealties with Scour or Summer's Fall. And so we need to be able to get extra fealties against them, and this is an extra 2 copies of fealty generator. Also in those matchups, the opponent's a bit slower, so we often get hands where we can keep a blue in this and swing it, which is quite nice. And so, and it's just 6 extra deck damage, right? Sometimes they'll try to fatigue us because Fang is semi-fatiguable. Not really, but like there's a 5% chance they could, I guess. And this helps prevent that too because you get 12 extra damage right here out of these 2 cards. And most people aren't expecting it, right? Like a lot of times I'll pitch a blue or, I'll attack pitch a blue, and I have 2 floating, and they think, okay, it's gonna be like a dagger coming in for 4, um, and then I'll use the last resource for like a vigor or something. But then you come in with 2 extra damage on the For the Realm, so it's pretty nice. I like it. It's much better than a D-React into decks where the D-Reacts don't do anything. So into like I said, Florian and Verdance, almost the whole sideboard is for those 2 matchups. Like these 4 cards right here, For the Realm and Arcane Polarity and Twist and Turn, these are all for those matchups, because you basically don't want the Fates or the Sinks into those, and maybe not even the Smoke Out. So I think I look at Verdance, Crown of Providence is not what we play. Yeah, you can see we side out all 9 defense reactions. And so we have the Twist and Turns coming in, also the Parched Terrains, the For the Realms, and the Arcane Polarities. So 9, easy 9 for 9 swap for that matchup, and then running the Null Rune Hood as well. We actually, like, the Null Rune Hood is kind of decent into any decks that do pings of 1, which is often Verdance and often Florian and other Rune Blades, because we are running like 15 blues, so there is a decent chance. I mean, I've had a game into Vincent where I was quite behind. I think they were like at 18 and I was at 3 or something like that. But then I switched on, had my 3 fealty, really was able to get huge value. They draw like a clunky do nothing hand, which obviously is kind of necessary for me to win from that position. But then they get the gas 3 turns in a row after, assuming they were going to kill me with Rune Chance. And they come in with exactly 3 Rune Chance 3 turns in a row, and I just happen to have a blue all 3 turns in a row. So I just AB3, 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 AB1 3 times, I should say, with Null Rune Hood. And if I didn't have Null Rune Hood there and I didn't have 15 blues, I would have been super dead. So there are definitely scenarios where having the 15 blues with AB1 is fairly relevant for the deck. So that's Fang. I think he's pretty solid right now. Still pretty favored into Gravy. I think into KO you're favored, and KO is being played a lot. And I think into Verdance you're, I would say, favored now. So out of the top 5 decks, which I think are KO, Verdance, Gravy, Florian, and Syndra, I think you're good into 3 of them. I think Florian is a bit rough still, and I think Syndra is probably the hardest. She just aggroes you a little too fast before you can get to 3 fealty. But if Syndra stumbles a little bit, like if she has 1 weak turn, usually it's enough if you draw okay to win. It's still a pretty close matchup. And then Florian, I think, is maybe better. I just haven't put enough testing into it yet. I've been mostly testing the other matchups. I think it's winnable now. It's maybe fine. But the deck's always kind of hard. He can just fatigue pretty well and do Germinate stuff now. So I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, pick up the deck. I think he's not too difficult, but he definitely has a small learning curve, since you have to learn, mostly learn your opponents. Like, when do I react? What reactions do they have? It's kind of fundamental warrior things, I suppose. But let me know what you think of the deck in the comments below. I'll make sure I do a Fang update for like most sets. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, comment. I'll see you next time.